And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, still to come on our live program. The new British Prime Minister's Brexit strategy amid skepticism over a no-deal outcome. That discussion right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is on his visit to Northern Ireland on Wednesday, the key battleground of Brexit, after his visit to Scotland and Wales in an attempt to unite the UK. During the visit, he said he's very confident that a new deal can be reached with the EU. But could Mr. Johnson deliver Brexit with or without a divorce deal? Before we get down to a discussion with people in the know, let's take a look at this.
No red carpet rolled out. The British Prime Minister booed by protesters in Scotland. His meeting with Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon face-to-face was not helping them see eye to eye over Brexit. Working on his promise to leave the European Union, Mr. Johnson's visit to Scotland was about ensuring a divorce deal doesn't fall apart. He insisted the UK and the EU could still chart a course to a new Brexit deal.
What we wanted to do is to make it absolutely clear that the backstop is no good. It's dead. It's got to go. The withdrawal agreement is dead. It's got to go. But there is scope to do a new deal.
Cranking up the pace for a no-deal planning, he seems to contradict cabinet colleagues who suggest that no deal is the most likely outcome.
That makes me think that whatever Boris Johnson might be saying publicly about his preference being to strike a deal, in reality he is really pursuing a no-deal Brexit, because that is the logic of the hardline position that he has taken. And I think that is extremely dangerous for Scotland, indeed for the whole of the UK.
Beneath the game of brinkmanship between London and Brussels was a more important message. When it comes to Brexit, from Theresa May to Boris Johnson, has anything changed? While Mr. Johnson believes he can still compel the EU to alter the deal, the bloc, for its part, repeatedly told London that the Irish backstop remains an unmovable red line. So a forced no-deal Brexit? A renegotiated deal? Or a request for the UK's fourth Brexit extension? Uncertainties over Mr. Johnson's Brexit nightmare, and he won't have much time to wake up from it.
For more on the new British Prime Minister's visit to Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales and his Brexit strategy, let's turn to our panelists. In London, we have Professor Ian Begg, who's originally coming from Scotland. He is right now from the European Institute, of course, also co-director of the Darendorf Forum of the London School of Economics and Political Science. Welcome. In Brussels, we invited Larissa Brunner, policy analyst at the European Policy Center. Welcome as well. Last but not least, in Beijing, China, Cui Hongjian, director of the Department of European Studies, China Institute of International Studies. I want to start with you, Professor Begg. I'm sure you are very dear to this topic. Do you think a no-deal Brexit possible?
It's possible, and the chances of it happening have increased as a result both of the change of Prime Minister and the more hardline government that he's introduced. But I still cling to the hope that there are enough sensible people in the House of Commons, which you can see behind me here, to prevent it happening. It's also possible that what Boris Johnson is doing is ramping up the pressure today as a bluff to try to persuade the European Union to change some of its policies, in particular the one that was mentioned in your package, the Irish backstop. So if you take my optimism at face value, I'd say no, we're not going to have a no deal, but it's going to be a tricky few weeks trying to avoid it.
Is it optimism or pessimism that's running in your mind, Ms. Brunner?
I have to say I'm a lot less optimistic than Professor Ian Beck. I have to say because I think Boris Johnson has painted himself in a corner through his very categorical statements on the Irish backstop, which you've mentioned, and he doesn't just want to change it, he wants to drop it. And for the EU, that is completely unacceptable. So really the only way to stop no-deal Brexit would be through the UK Parliament, but I am a lot less optimistic that it will actually change, it will actually stop Boris Johnson if he is actually determined to go for no deal.
I see Mr. Tway now, he's trying to make the trip to Northern Ireland, Scotland, and also to the Wales. Will he be able to, along his way, convince a few hearts and minds?
It's difficult, as we know, especially for the Scotland and also North Ireland. As we know, now it's very possible once there is a no deal, Brexit prospect. Certainly, I think there will be some negative response from a Scottish local government. As we know, even maybe the second referendum to leave from the UK. Another issue, very difficult, is North Ireland. As we know, so-called backstop solution, once there's a no deal, it's very possible that there will be very, dangerous situation happen between Ireland and the UK.
Yeah, but Professor Begg, at least he set a deadline, right? In the end of October, in a way. And at least he's talking about one possibility, that is a no-deal Brexit. Let the whole administration work in that direction. Now, will he have a bigger chance of succeeding than the previous one, Prime Minister May?
Well, let's not forget that Theresa May also set deadlines of the 29th of March and then the 12th of April, so she didn't succeed in sticking to those deadlines. I think he has more chance of persuading some of the more awkward people in his own party inside the House of Commons. But the downside of that is he will lose some of those who were more supportive of Theresa May. So it's a you win some, you lose some kind of argument, or 2 steps forward, 1 step back, a different way of putting it. The risk is that it comes to a crunch in 6 weeks' time, probably in early October, when there's going to have to be very tough decisions on whether to attack Boris Johnson, including the possibility of a no-confidence vote in the House of Commons, because the procedure by which it will be stopped is as yet uncertain. And this is where the flexibility in the British constitutional system is both an opportunity and a problem, because we don't quite know how it would happen.
Right, but Ms. Brunner, how will the places that he visits and the players in those regions, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, be able to bounce back or against his suggestion, and how will they interact according to the politics of the region, and how will the EU read all these messages? These are fascinating questions.
Absolutely. If we just take Scotland as an example, I think Boris Johnson is incredibly unpopular in Scotland, and it doesn't really help that the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, has made absolutely no secret of her animosity towards Boris Johnson. So, in a way, I think the Scottish National Party, which is in government in Scotland and which was another Scottish independence referendum, is probably delighted at the moment, not least because leader and First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has looks I think makes a very positive impression to many people compared with Boris Johnson. So, and that will of course be watched very, very closely by the EU, because if a Scottish independence referendum were to take place and if Scotland were to vote for independence, which is by no means guaranteed because the polls split, and at the moment in most polls there is no majority for Scottish independence. But if that were to change because of a no-deal Brexit, for example, then the next question for the EU would be how to treat it and whether to sort of accept Scotland, basically pave the way for Scotland to easily access the EU.
A series of questions, one after another, that can be asked. It's fascinating. But to you, Professor Begg, what about Northern Ireland, which of course is a crucial issue? How will Northern Ireland be able to react to Boris Johnson, and what do you think could be some of the messages sent to him or at least to his direction?
Well, it's important to understand the divisions in Northern Ireland itself. The Democratic Ulster Unionist Party is keeping Boris Johnson in power because in the House of Commons he is a minority.
Yes.
And it's the 10 votes of the Democratic Ulster Unionists that ensure that the Conservatives only just have a majority today of 2, possibly going down to 1 next week after a by-election. If they change their minds, he's in trouble. But the other side of Northern Ireland is the nationalists, and for historical reasons they don't take their seats in the House of Commons. They've always said, no, we will not swear the oath of allegiance to the Queen and therefore sit in the House of Commons. So that division in Northern Ireland is very powerful. Now the great irony of what's happening around the backstop is that if it is no deal, then it's impossible to avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland, which is precisely what the backstop is designed to avoid. So Boris Johnson is playing with fire in what he's doing, because no deal would mean 2 different custom regimes on the island of Ireland, and you cannot sustain 2 regimes unless you have a border. It's as simple as that.
Talking about playing with fire, that has always been the style of Mr. Johnson, if you look at how he rises in politics. And therefore, probably he's really enjoying the moment right now, Mr. Cui. And particularly when you think about the styles of governance recently, whether it's in the United States or some of the other countries, strongman politicians, very unique type of strongman politicians seems to be there. So will Mr. Johnson be able to use some of the thought about ways in traditional politics and be able to implement them this time for his advantage? That's what many people would be very fascinated to know about. Mr. Cui.
So far, we can find out even some non-traditional, skills and also instrument used by Mr. Johnson. We can find out now maybe his skill is to force himself in the corner firstly, and then try to look for a kind of rebound from society, from his party, and also even from Parliament. And also we can find maybe another roadmap for Mr. Johnson is try to find out the chance to have a snap election. And once it happens, perhaps he could take a majority in Parliament. Once it happens, certainly, I think Mr. Johnson and the Conservative Party will take control of this domination in this Brexit.
Oh my God, this is blowing my mind already in a way. Mr. Begg, so many scenarios. It's very hard to narrow down to one of the possibilities or 2 of the possibilities. So tell me, what should people bear in mind, particularly the public inside the UK and those from Wales, from Northern Ireland, from Scotland, what should they bear in mind about the politics going on regarding no-deal Brexit?
Well, the first thing to maybe distinguish is that when we talk about general elections or a second referendum, these are processes by which you arrive at a decision. No deal, a deal, or even staying in the EU are all outcomes, which will be the result of whichever process you select. And we sometimes confuse the process and the outcome in a way which is unhelpful to understanding. I think that there is now in the country much more support for staying in the EU, but that's tempered by a concern that we must respect the referendum result of 2016 if we are to be democratic. And that tension between what public opinion is now and the respect for the democratic decision of 3 years ago is at the heart of the great difficulties that you are witnessing and that are blowing your mind at the moment.
Will Brussels, Ms. Brunner, be able to watch this with a lot of patience or actually a lot of rhetorics, Ms. Brunner?
I think from the perspective of the EU, there's just not very much it can do at the moment. I think it is quite clear that a lot of Mr. Johnson's rhetoric is really targeted at a domestic audience rather than necessarily at the EU. And so I think at the moment the EU is sort of quietly watching it to see what Mr. Johnson is actually going to do, and also what, if anything, the UK Parliament is going to do to stop him. But apart from that, there's really not much the EU can do. And I think there's also a certain Brexit fatigue in the EU, and there's, I think, more and more the view that it really would be good to end this, and even if there's a no deal. I mean, there's a really nice saying in German.
Yeah.
It says that it's better to have a horrible ending than horror with no end, and I think that really applies here.
Well, we have to come to the end at least of this discussion before we have any result about the deal or no deal Brexit. Mr. Cui, final words from you.
I think now we needed some more time for waiting. What's the solution could from Mr. Johnson?
Yeah.
But I think no matter what it happens, it will give a very big test now for the relations between UK and the EU.
Some more time, some more debates, and certainly it's much more drama. Thank you so much, the three of you, for now. Ian Begg, Larissa Brunner, Cui Hongjian. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Inside CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Inside team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for more insights across China and around the world. Good night.